If you're like me, you're probably bored of using Ableton Live's arpeggiator to create really standard and boring sounding melodies or arps. So why not have a more interesting and modular approach to create these sounds? Well, that's what I'm going to show you today. Let's dive in. So this is the groove that I have prepared here, just a couple drums. And now I'd like to move it on to a more melodic part of the track. I'd like to add some kind of melody or preferably some kind of pluck, arpeggio, anything that'll just get my vibes going. So the first thing I'm going to do is create a MIDI track. Command-Shift-T to create one. In this MIDI track, we're going to load up a sample, and you can take any sample that contains some kind of melodic or harmonic information, chords, plucks, anything works really. You can go to Loopmasters, Splice, any service that you prefer, or LotusTunes as well. Have a ton of sample packs there. And just load up a sound. For example, in the Afro pack, I have a couple of these song starters that really work well. For example, let's just drop it in. And now just to get things started, I'm going to load up a MIDI clip by double-clicking the timeline here. I'm going to go into 8th note and place a note on every second 8th note. So we get more of like a hi-hat pattern for these plucks. Let's dial down the volume. Now if we hit play, it always plays the sample every second 8th note at the very beginning. What if we want to change that? What if we want to add more melodic variation to this sound? Therefore, we're going to load literally my most favorite device called LFO. We're going to put it right after the simpler device here and map this to the starting position. I really love mapping LFO to the starting position because it retains the character of the sound, doesn't change the vibe. And now let's give it a play. Interesting. Now it creates more variation. So on every second 8th note, you get a different tone. That's because we're basically scrolling through the sample at a rate of 1 hertz. Now you can also change that to 1 bar. So every bar, it slides along the entire sample. And if you don't like it to have this smooth up and down movement of this wave, you can change it to square as well. So it jumps from A to B. Interesting. You can also crank down the depth so it doesn't jump from beginning to end, but it jumps more in the middle of the sound. You can also offset the position so it starts differently. It's really fun. It's honestly really fun to mess around with these. And if you crank down the sustain to -infinity, dial down the decay to 300 milliseconds, you get a plucky sound. And if you dial up the decay, it almost acts like you're opening a cutoff filter on a synth, so it's really great for build-ups as well. Crank up the release, notes get longer. If you want to change the vibe, you can right-click the sample, show in browser, and drop in another sound, like this one over here. Dial down the release, decay, give it a plucky vibe. And if you go into controls, you can also transpose the sound up or down. And remember, this is more about tweaking your parameters until you feel like you get something interesting that sparks an emotion in you. So again, we can also change it back to sine. And just to demonstrate the power and versatility of this method, I'm just going to load up any type of chord sound that I have here in my library and give it a play. And you can also jump back into the MIDI, change your MIDI here. So let's go into 16th and maybe place the MIDI differently and move it to the right with arrow. Grooves differently. And you can also load up synth one-shots. I have a couple of those here in Yerevan as well. So just put them in here. I find it cool to have a sound that is a bit longer because you can scroll through different parts of it. Can change the rate, and if you don't want to click at the beginning, you can just change the attack to like 0.3 milliseconds. Cool. Now you can add a bit of movement to the sound. There is a preset by Filter Delay that is called Moving 356. I'm just going to load that onto the layer directly. Preferably you would want to add effects like these on your sends, but for the sake of sound design, I'm just going to keep it on the layer directly today. Pan it more towards the middle. Reduce the volume on the sides here, left and right. And already we're getting that arpeggiated vibe from a sample and the movement from within that sample here. Let's change it back to 1 bar. Nice. You can pitch it anytime. Widen it. And again, by reducing the decay here, you get a pluckier sound. Yet if you open it up here, if you open up the decay, the sound opens up like you would open up a cutoff filter on a synth. It's like a build-up now, right? Reduce it back down. Yeah, it's a great little arrangement tool that you can also use. And what you can do is then also group the simpler and the LFO, Command G, open up your chain list over here, duplicate the chain list, and drag in a different sound onto the second chain list here. Yeah, sounds kind of like Guy J. Sébastien Léger, those types of vibes. Maybe you can combine them as well. This is a really great method not only to come up with melodic ideas, but also to arrange your tracks. You could duplicate your entire section here, take away the kick, duplicate it again. So we have the kick removed for a couple bars over here, and the kick comes back in at bar 9. So what we can do in this section over here is just open up the decay and bring it back down whenever the kick comes back in. Nice. That's really great for arrangement. You can also swell it back down like this. And automating the release also helps here, this guy. That's another video for you. Thank you so much for watching. You can grab all these sounds on LotusTunes, like and subscribe, and leave a comment down below if you learned anything new. I'll see you in the next video. Peace.